NSA contractor turned whistleblower Edward Snowden is awaiting a flight out of Moscow, which is thought to be destined for Cuba, and it's leaving in just a matter of hours. He arrived in the Russian capital on Sunday, having fled Hong Kong, with Washington in hot pursuit. RT's Paul Scott is at the airport for us.
Well, as far as we understand, Edward Snowden does remain here at Moscow's Sheremetyevo Airport in the terminal building behind me. As you say, he arrived just after 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon on a commercial flight inbound from Hong Kong. He was greeted by the Ecuadorian ambassador, and 3 hours after landing, the confirmation came that he had sought political asylum in the South American country. Now, Ecuador, we still believe, is mulling over whether or not to grant asylum to Edward Snowden. He is expected to just remain in transit here in Moscow, as you say, before flying to Havana in Cuba a little bit later on this afternoon. But to really put this story in context, we need to rewind and see what's happened over the last 48 hours or so, really, over the course of the weekend, because it was on Friday that the charges against Edward Snowden were made public for the very first time. Now, the complaint was filed by the US government on June the 14th, but, as I say, the charges only were made public on Friday. Now, the charges include theft of government property, unauthorized communication of national defense information, and willful communication of classified intelligence. Now, the final two of those charges both come under the Espionage Act and carry a maximum of 10 years in prison each. So Edward Snowden now knows what he's up against and knows exactly what he faces if he does indeed return to the United States. And on Saturday, the US government began extradition proceedings against Edward Snowden. They were in communication with the Hong Kong authorities. Now, the Hong Kong authorities initially said that they were prepared to work with the US government to extradite Edward Snowden to the United States, but they needed guarantees that the charges against him were not politically motivated. And the fact that he has been allowed to leave the Chinese territory would suggest that those guarantees were not met. We're led to believe he's not travelling alone. He does have representatives, as you say, legal representatives from Wikileaks travelling with him, because it's Wikileaks who have apparently brokered the entire deal, securing his safe passage from Hong Kong, eventually, hopefully, on Snowden's behalf to Ecuador via both Moscow and Havana. And it is also Wikileaks who have attempted to broker the deal that will secure him, they hope, asylum in Ecuador.
RT's Paul Scott there, reporting from Sheremetyevo Airport. Now, Snowden has apparently spent the night in that airport, located well within the transit zone. Let's now cross out live to our correspondent, Yegor Piskunov, who's very, very close by indeed, and can bring us the latest on this. Good to see you, Yegor. Any ideas now? Mr. Snowden, his whereabouts, where is he?
Well, it's the biggest mystery at the moment, isn't it? And I'm actually inside this transit zone where it's most likely that Mr. Snowden is, because since he landed, his plane landed at Sheremetyevo Airport at around 5 p.m. On Sunday, he's still not been seen leaving the airport's premises. And, well, there's speculation that he doesn't have a Russian visa. Plus, his passport was invalidated, so he can't walk outside of the airport, leave its premises. So it's most likely that he's inside this transit zone. Now, there's speculation that he may be staying at this capsule hotel within the zone. And also, we know that the Ecuadorian ambassador visited the Sheremetyevo Airport on Sunday and spent a few hours behind closed doors at this VIP lounge, also here inside the transit zone. So perhaps he was meeting with Mr. Snowden, although he never commented on whether or not, never really officially confirmed it. When he left the airport, he was accompanied by some people, but nobody could really identify whether the former CIA agent was one of them. Now, it's also reported that Mr. Snowden may be waiting for a flight here to Cuba. This is according to speculation in the media, which quotes an unnamed source within Airflot. And, well, just to remind you again, his passport has been invalidated. Nevertheless, he was still let out of China, apparently allowed to enter Russia. And, well, on one hand, this doesn't really fit into international legal practices, but on the other hand, this is the gray area in international law, which apparently is not such a big obstacle. If your passport has been invalidated, then you could still enter or leave a country. And apparently, this is what we're seeing now. In fact, this plane is scheduled to leave Moscow at around 2 p.m. Later on Monday.
All right, so 2 p.m. Moscow time. That's about 5 hours from now. Artito Yegor Piskunov at the Moscow Sheremetyevo Airport. Thank you. All right, let's delve deeper into this breaking news here on RT and go straight to Hong Kong, where we're now joined live by Asia Times correspondent and international affairs analyst Pepe Escobar. A big hello to you from Moscow. Thanks so much for jumping on so quickly with this breaking news story, Pepe. Ultimately, Washington threatens Hong Kong with severe repercussions. Cooperate with us and let us get our hands on Mr. Snowden, the former CIA employee, current whistleblower. Somehow Hong Kong lets this high-profile figure slip under the radar and get out of town. How does that happen?
No, it's much better than the Bourne trilogy because it's live and it's happening in front of us. You remember until a few hours ago, in every outlet in U.S. corporate media was Washington intimating Hong Kong to extradite Snowden very quickly. You know what was happening here in Hong Kong? He was in contact with Hong Kong authorities. He was protected by them. He was in what they call a safe house. It was not. It was a safe place where he was talking to local officials. And they organized an escape route, which Snowden himself had already. It was already part of his plan A, according to another one of our sources here. Hong Kong would be a stopover. He would go to a third country. We still don't know if this is going to be Ecuador or Iceland. And by the way, in 3 hours in Moscow, it's going to be another stopover. He's not going to stay in Russia. So what he did, he came to Hong Kong. He released a lot of information to The Guardian first, and then to the South China Morning Post, the English language daily here. Especially these few, the last few documents he released are devastating because it proves that Tsinghua University, one of the top universities in China, in Beijing, was being hacked by the US. That Hong Kong was being hacked for...
Indeed, we've been covering this story in depth, Pepe, about America's, basically, its empire of spying around the world, particularly in China. But when it comes to Hong Kong, so we understand Edward Snowden, according to you, he's in Hong Kong, he's in touch with the local media, he's in touch with officials who allegedly give him a possible escape route. Is it a part of defiance on the part of Hong Kong towards Washington, or more of a case of Hong Kong not wanting to get involved?
Definitely not, Rory. In fact, I wish I could read it for you, but I memorized a little bit. The Hong Kong government, they released a statement about 2 hours ago, after Snowden was already on SU-213 going to Moscow. They say that they didn't have enough elements to grant what the U.S. wanted, a provisional warrant of arrest, in fact. So they decided to, they didn't even release him because he was not in jail. Said he left Hong Kong in a normal, legal manner. And that's exactly what happened. He took a taxi, he went to the airport, and he boarded an Aeroflot flight.
It certainly must be ruffling some feathers on Capitol Hill, to say the least. Ultimately, though, allegations. This former CIA employee turned whistleblower, Edward Snowden, allegations he's somewhere over Russian airspace, expected a touchdown in Moscow. You say Moscow won't be his final destination. Where do you think he'll go, or where do you think he's welcome to go?
No crystal ball, Rory, but another one of my sources told me that this was a plan A from the start. A stopover in Hong Kong, which lasted roughly 3 weeks, right? And now that he more or less, let's assume, we still don't know, that he organized his final destination. Could be Iceland, could be Ecuador. So Russia is going to be another stopover. The thing is, this is between two very important BRICS countries, China and Russia. China got itself out of the picture in terms of being close to Snowden, or at least interfering in his future. Russia won't be part of it, but Snowden is weaving a web where everybody is involved. The US, Russia, and China, three of the
But Pepe, if I may, I'm sorry to jump in here. We're running so low on time, but Washington has made it very clear that it wants to get its hands on Snowden. To what extent? How far do you think Washington will go?
I was discussing this 5 minutes ago. What are they going to do? They're going to launch a Hellfire missile against an Aeroflot flight. in Russian airspace? I think it's game, set, match. If Snowden arrives in Moscow in 3 hours and he connects, he stays in transit for two hours, and he departs for a third country, this is over. And he's not going.
Do you think that with Julian Assange, the world's most recognized Wikileaker, the whistleblower Julian Assange, in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, holed up for the past year, now we have Edward Snowden trying to find a place of safe refuge. Do you think people like these two men inspire others to become whistleblowers, or perhaps it's all scaring other people to unveil the hidden truth around the world?
Oh, no, definitely. I would say we're going to have a collection of Assanges, Mannings, and Snowdens from now on, especially from a lot of U.S. tech geeks that are extremely uncomfortable with this Orwellian panopticon surveillance state. Not only in the U.S., but we saw the revelations with Britain as well. It's an Anglo-American thing. Of course, everybody's involved in cyber war as well, but the forefront is the U.S.
All right, Pepe Escobar, international affairs analyst, joining us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Roddy.
Washington has revoked Edward Snowden's passport and said that he should be prevented from traveling any further. That's as officials demand that he be returned to the jurisdiction of the United States. Some lawmakers are urging Washington to spare no effort to put him on trial in the U.S., even going so far as to threaten Russia over its involvement. Ortiz Chichican has been following the story from the U.S.
U.S. officials confirmed that they have, in fact, revoked Edward Snowden's passport to stop him from traveling. It didn't stop him from flying out of Hong Kong, as we know. Not clear whether it was because Hong Kong officials did not receive the notification in time or because they made a decision to overlook it. We know that the U.S. has put a lot of pressure on Hong Kong to arrest Snowden and not to let him leave the country. But in a statement, the government of Hong Kong says U.S. documentation did not fully comply with the legal requirements under Hong Kong law, but also in the same statement, the government of Hong Kong adds that they want more information about the hacking of computer systems in Hong Kong by U.S. government agencies, something that was part of Snowden's revelation. So in this official statement, we see how Hong Kong shifts the focus from the messenger, Edward Snowden, back to the message, to the revelations that he has made, demanding an explanation from the U.S. Because these revelations show that the U.S. lied, that it has been doing the same as what it accuses China of doing. Policymakers here in the U.S. are doing everything to shift the attention away from Snowden's revelations by focusing on Snowden himself, or even by attacking other countries like Russia.
The Freedom Trail is not exactly China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, so I hope we'll chase him to the ends of the earth, bring him to justice, and let the Russians know there will be consequences if they harbor this guy.
Then I was listening to the former director of the CIA saying Russia and China are going to use this, meaning Snowden, to embarrass the U.S. And one would argue it's his revelations that embarrass the U.S., not China or Russia. The U.S. government is clearly afraid of more revelations from Snowden.
I want to get him caught and brought back for trial. And I think we need to know exactly what he has. He could have a lot more. It may really put people in jeopardy. I don't know. But I think the chase is on, and we'll have to see what happens.
The debate in the U.S. media has shifted to this chase mode, to this cat and mouse game. It's now all about how we're going to catch him. So right now, the media is unsympathetic to Edward Snowden, although just a week ago, some of the same journalists who are almost cheerleading for his capture now were grateful for Snowden's revelations, which were indeed eye-opening for all of us. As far as the prospect of being caught, here's what Edward Snowden himself said.
I could be, rendered by the CIA. I could have people come after me, or any of their third-party partners. They work closely with a number of other nations. And that's a fear I'll live under for the rest of my life, however long that happens to be. You can't come forward against the world's most powerful intelligence agencies and be completely free from risk, because they're such powerful adversaries that no one can meaningfully oppose them. If they want to get you, they'll get you in time.
Edward Snowden also said it's not government persecution that he fears. He said, the greatest fear that I have about the outcome of these disclosures is that nothing will change. More on that in my report. America is split on Edward Snowden.
Traitor, hero, mix in between.
But regardless of what anyone thinks about Snowden, his revelations have shed unprecedented light on the U.S. government's massive spying program.
Even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded.
Former NSA employee William Binney was prosecuted as a traitor when he blew the whistle on the government's sweeping collection of data and communications.
It's setting up a totalitarian state. When the government has that much information, they can do those things. They can use the IRS to intimidate people or anything else. They can send the FBI at people, what they did to me and some others.
Bradley Manning, too, is being prosecuted as a traitor, although it's through his war logs that the public learned about the ease with which collateral murder was committed in Iraq. The Obama administration has prosecuted more whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than all previous administrations combined. But whistleblowers say it's not government persecution that they fear.
The greatest fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change.
The administration is now trying to convince the American people that government secret programs are a trade-off they have to make in the name of national security.
They always have these same stories about all of them, you know, Assange, Manning, Snowden, you know, psychological stories. What is wrong with these people that caused them to do this? I mean, the real question is what is wrong with everyone else who doesn't see what they can see?
But whistleblowers are not the only targets.
There is an obligation, both moral but also legal, I believe, against a reporter.
That was the chairman of the House Committee on Counterintelligence and Terrorism, Peter King, calling to punish the journalists who exposed the government's surveillance programs. In its hunt for leaks, the Obama administration has already targeted journalists.
It's trying to set the precedent that communicating with the media is the same as communicating with the enemy, and that's a death penalty offense.
The administration doesn't have to go after each leaker or each journalist. It's enough to create an environment of fear. But will that fear stop information from coming out? Here's Edward Snowden's answer to that question. The administration's draconian responses simply build better whistleblowers, he said. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chekan.
A phone conference. Wikileaks has been assisting Snowden's getaway. They're holding a phone conference that we're going to listen in on.
Mr. Snowden has submitted an asylum application to Ecuador and possibly to other countries. The Ecuadorian Foreign Minister, Latino, has said that the asylum application is being carefully considered. Mr. Snowden requested that WikiLeaks use its legal expertise and experience to secure his safety. The current status of Mr. Snowden and Ms. Harrison both are healthy and safe. They're both are healthy and safe, and they are in contact with their legal team. I cannot give further information as to their whereabouts or present circumstances, other than to say that the matter is in hand. Today, we have seen a range of extreme bellicose statements from the US administration attempting to bully Russia and other nations from facilitating Mr. Snowden's asylum. Every person has the right to seek and receive political asylum. Those rights are enshrined in the United Nations Agreement, of which the United States is a party. It is counterproductive and unacceptable for the Obama administration to try and interfere with those rights. It reflects poorly on the US administration, and no self-respecting country would submit to such interference or such bullying by the US in this matter. This morning, the US Secretary of State called Edward Snowden traitor. However, this morning the US Secretary of State called Edward Snowden a traitor. Edward Snowden is not a traitor. He is not a spy. He is a whistleblower who has told the public an important truth. The US Secretary of State is wrong in law. In law, a traitor must adhere to US enemies, and there is also a requirement that the conduct is in congressionally approved wartime. Neither of these feature here. The US administration was not given a mandate. The Obama administration was not given a mandate by the people of the United States to hack and spy upon the entire world, to breach the US Constitution and the laws of other nations in the manner that it has. To now attempt to violate international asylum law by calling for the rendition of Edward Snowden further demonstrates the breakdown in the rule of law by the Obama administration, which has sadly become familiar to so many. Let us not forget that today, while Edward Snowden is seeking asylum, the young soldier Bradley Manning is on trial for telling us the truth. Edward Snowden and Bradley Manning, unfortunately, are not anomalies. Their prosecution is part of a pattern of misconduct, part of the Obama administration's war on whistleblowers. The use of the 1917 Espionage Act against journalistic sources by the Obama administration must be condemned. The Obama administration has now pursued 8 journalistic sources using the Espionage Act. That is more than twice of all previous presidents combined, stemming back to 1917. The Obama administration hopes to erect a new interpretation. A new interpretation of law, which defines journalistic sources as spies. And that is not acceptable. If such a precedent is permitted, it will result in the complete destruction of national security journalism within the United States. And already serious national security journalists are speaking about how their government sources are too scared to reveal government misconduct in the national security sphere. That's an extremely serious matter. the same time as the national security sector of the United States is increasing its share of the US tax burden, and at the same time where unprecedented levels of criminality and abuse are being uncovered, it seeks to weaken the press, which is the only effective mechanism of bringing it to account. In the Obama administration's attempt to crush these young whistleblowers with espionage charges, the US government is taking on a generation. A young generation of people who find the mass violation of the right of privacy and open process unacceptable. In taking on a generation, the Obama administration can only lose. Pursuing Edward Snowden and pursuing Bradley Manning is not the way to fix the weaknesses of law and process in the United States. The only way to fix these are to change the policies, to stop spying on the world, to eradicate secret law, to cease indefinite detention without trial, to stop the Obama administration's assassination program, to stop invading other countries and sending young Americans off to kill and be killed. It is these problems which are stimulating national security whistleblowers to come forward. The Obama administration doesn't want government sources to speak to the press. It should stop engaging in conduct which is so outrageous as to cause them to come forward. The charging of Edward Snowden is intended to not... Sorry, let me begin again. The charging of Edward Snowden is not a matter of justice. It is an attempt to intimidate any country that might be considering standing up for his right to tell us all the truth. Such behaviour must not be tolerated and will not be tolerated by any self-respecting nation or by the press at large. Everyone should tell their governments to step forward and assist Mr Snowden in his asylum, and the press also has an obligation to do so. That's it from me.